Hello and welcome to another instalment of Empire of the Cop Insider. I'm Farrell Keeling and I've got Neil Jones back with me here today again. What better place to kick things off than the 3-1 comeback win against Wolves? I have to say, the first half, as I'm sure for you as well, really brought back some traumatic memories of the prior season. You know, the toothlessness, the inability to string passes together, a general sort of lack of cohesion or idea or game plan. But I suppose we can put that down partly to factors like coming back from the international break and that unholy 12:30 p.m. kickoff time. McAllister, of course, has been off in the mountains, had breathing apparatus, and just I think Klopp mentioned after the game as well, he just wasn't in the best of shape. But ultimately, we come out with a hugely improved second half performance, and this is a side now that is repeatedly, Neil, showing resiliency and mental fortitude this season. Are Klopp's mentality giants back?
Well, it's definitely getting towards the point where you can ask a question and not feel silly asking it. They're showing something different, aren't they, every week? Something new, something positive in the way that they're playing. And I think if you compare, just to compare apples with apples, if you compare that Wolves game in February where Liverpool 2-0 down inside 12 minutes, and I think I remember writing and saying at the time that I thought they were going to get beat from the first 20 seconds of the game when Joel Matip fired his first pass sort of straight to Ruben Neves, and I thought, oh, it's going to be a long day. Even in amongst all that first half, and listen, it wasn't good to watch. It was horrible to watch at times. Some of the passing, some of just the lack of sort of intensity or the being in the wrong position too often. Some of that was worrying. But even in amongst all that, I did get the impression that Liverpool felt like they were going to get better. They felt like they will get a chance. They will equalise. They will find a way back into the game. And half time was going to be quite important. And listen, it was night and day, wasn't it? First half to second half, that Liverpool were unrecognisable once they'd made the change at half time, but they'd also changed the system. And I think that was, credit to the manager. He got it wrong. I think in his team selection, he got it very right about what he did at half time and in the second half.
No, absolutely, absolutely. There's a couple of players I really want to touch on. Firstly, 20-year-old Jerrell Quansah, who I thought, I think Klopp mentioned after the game, it's quite a statement from a young player when you see that first half, and he's probably the only one that looked, vaguely okay. So
Yeah.
it comes in. It's quite a difficult task, really. Joe Gomez has moved to the right back slot. Is tasked with sort of playing that inverted Trent role. You've got Joel Matip in alongside him, but the big hitters, Virgil van Dijk, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Konate, of course, not available. But it was a really mature performance from him, I thought.
Yeah, it was. I think he can be very proud of his first Premier League start. If you think about, I think a couple of things. But one is obviously he's got so little experience, senior level. League One, playing 15, 16 games for Bristol Rovers, and then a sub appearance at Newcastle. But if you also think that he isn't someone really that's until this summer, I don't think anyone's really thought of him around as being even a potential first team. And I think his name will have surprised a lot of people when it was around the pre-season squads and the games and that. And I think to look so assured when you're that young, but you're sort of you've you've never been earmarked as this sort of this massive prospect. Like when Trent Alexander-Arnold comes into the side, or when Curtis Jones comes into the side, or even someone like Ben Doak, there's a little bit of an expectation on them, but you feel like they've got broader shoulders as a result of that expectation. Jerrell Quansah hasn't really had that. I know he's been captain of the 18s, but he's a bit of a surprise inclusion, and the way that he looks, he just looks so confident, so comfortable, so assured. He really uses the ball well for a centre back. There's a lot of when we've talked about Levi Colwill a lot in this summer because of obviously centre back transfers. There is a little bit of that about him, isn't it? The way he sort of uses the ball. He likes to rest on the ball, stand on it, and wait for a player to come and press him. You don't see him sort of playing aimless passes very often for the centre back. His completion rate was the best of anyone who played in the game on Saturday, and he had a lot of them as well. So yeah, really, really positive. I've only seen good things from him this pre-season and in the last 12 months, indeed. I've only seen growth in him, physically, technically, but also in terms of game awareness. And for a young centre back to do the what he did at Molineux in a performance that was for 45 minutes at least very, very suspect, with senior players floundering alongside him. You mentioned Gomez and Matip. You mentioned McAllister, obviously in front of him. So I think for him to stand out the way he did and to continue that into the second half and actually get better in the game, as I thought, was a real sort of moment that can give him a lot of confidence and a lot of pride. And I think same goes for the people at the academy. You know, you think of Curtis making his 100th appearance, you've got Jerrell making his first Premier League start. Obviously, Trent is Trent. There's a lot of reasons for people at Kirby to take a lot of pride in what's been happening with these players, and in particular with Quansah.
No, absolutely, absolutely. The future's, very bright. It's always nice to see the academy lads sort of coming through as well and performing. I did think he was probably, had a case to, be sort of Liverpool's best defender throughout the game. One name who I have to bring up, and it feels like I keep bringing him up every single week, but he keeps giving us reasons to talk about him, is Dominic Szoboszlai. Bit of a poor, torrid first half, it does have to be said. And I think the main concern for me, certainly watching that game, was when you've looked at certainly the Aston Villa game where Liverpool felt dominant and in control and was sort of setting the tone. McAllister and Szoboszlai were so key to that element of control. So as soon as that went, you thought, oh my God, is this going to be like one of those games last season? But the manner in which Szoboszlai certainly returns to the pitch in the second half and really sort of grabs it by the scruff of the neck. He's a really sort of reliable. A lot's been made of his sort of leadership credentials. Obviously, he's the captain of the Hungarian national team. He's one of many leaders at Liverpool. But this is I thought that was quite an exciting sort of moment from him personally, just to see him sort of persevere after that first half, come back out in the second, and just deliver a performance of really sort of high quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think same goes for Curtis Jones. Actually, I think the two of them really made a massive difference in the second half when they went into that sort of two-man midfield, 4-2-3-1 system. I think Liverpool were really narrow in the first half. They were really sort of. It was a strange approach. I don't quite know what they were trying to do with it. They looked like they were trying to play through the middle of the pitch a lot, and that meant there was a lot of risky passes and there was a lot of sloppiness as a result of that. And they were getting counter attack quite often, usually through Pedro Neto or Semedo on the right. In the second half, it was completely different, wasn't it? The pitch was a lot wider. Obviously, they made changes. They brought on Diaz, Nunes to stretch the game a bit more, and Harvey Elliott. So it felt like the game was a lot more stretched out, and as a result, you could see the strengths of Szoboszlai and Curtis really shine. Their ability to get across the pitch, to get to the ball, first and second balls, their ability to keep the ball as well. Curtis is obviously brilliant at that, but Szoboszlai is pretty good at making sure that he doesn't give it away as well. Which was obviously that wasn't the case in the first half. And yeah, I think you're looking at players like that, those two in particular, 22, the pair of them, a real sort of maturity about the way that they play, a real confidence. They seem to like each other playing with it. You could see that they were lending the ball to each other and they seem to work in tandem very well. I think Szoboszlai in particular just looks like someone who, I think he's probably, it won't be long, I think, before he's sort of moving into that captaincy group, that leadership group, because he just looks like someone who knows how to play the game, who knows how to react in game situations. Whether it's a man being sent off. We saw that in the Bournemouth game, didn't we? When he stepped up his energy levels. You saw it in the Newcastle game. You can see it when if the opportunity presents itself to score and to shoot, he can do it. He can dribble. He's got a real good understanding of what a game needs. And he definitely showed that on Saturday. And yeah, you'll want to forget the first 45, but if you do want to forget the first 45, the best way to do it is by putting in a performance like the second 45. And yeah, I thought Curtis Jones, I have to give a mention to Luis Diaz off the bench as well. I have to give a mention to Andy Robertson for his performance. But I thought those players, in particular in midfield, I thought they were massive for Liverpool in terms of getting them back in control of the game, and eventually, their dominance and their what's the word? The sort of pressure that they put on with their stepping up the pitch and winning the ball, it really told in the end.
Absolutely. I think it's so important as well to see, players like Harvey Elliott coming off the bench as well, because when you're looking at And obviously, it's far too early to be saying, Liverpool are in a title race, or Liverpool, will be competing sort of head to head. But you think you'd like to see Liverpool there, and ultimately, we are 5 games in, we're 4 wins in. We have the joint sort of second best defence in the league as far as goals conceded. I think our actual sort of expected goals conceded is about 3rd behind Arsenal and Manchester City, inevitably. I do want to touch on. We talk about sort of players who had sort of bad first halves. Obviously, McAllister we can excuse for a whole sort of plethora of reasons. But it very much seems to be the case that McAllister seems to be our sort of starting sort of defensive holding midfielder right now. Do you feel this is sort of the sort of long-term solution sort of Klopp is going for? Because obviously we brought in Wataru Endo, presumably for that very reason. But I mean, generally speaking, McAllister hasn't put a foot wrong there. I know. So I think we've seen sort of against sort of Wolves specifically the moments where he's forced to sort of chase back, and you think, oh, you're not a natural sort of holding midfielder. But generally speaking, I think the performance levels have been quite good. Is that a concern for you, or do you feel that this is just a long term win?
No, I don't think it's a concern. I mean, look, he probably shouldn't have started the game, should he? I think Jürgen, the way he spoke on Friday, it was a surprise when his name was on the team sheet. He'd spoken about him being up a mountain in Bolivia, and we'd seen obviously, the impacts that it has on players. Bolivia is one of the toughest aways in world football, isn't it? With the altitude, so it was a surprise that he was in the team. I think you say you can excuse him. Of course, you can excuse him, but he still played poorly. You can't just say, well, he was up a mountain, so that what you want to do. He still gave the ball away in rotten positions too often, didn't he? And it was a poor performance from him, and rightly he was taken off at half time. I think the number 6 thing is, again, he's been in there, but we've seen Endo start. And the Endo started the game against Newcastle in the Gravenberch obviously now has been signed, and you heard Jürgen speaking about him on Friday and his potential long term to play as a number 6 if needed. I think what we saw potentially in the game against Wolves is there's a real case to be made for Liverpool to play with 2 midfielders and a number 10 or a more advanced player. And they've got some players who could do that, haven't they? They've got McAllister himself could probably do it. I think Gakpo could obviously do it. I think Harvey Elliott could do it on occasion if you needed to. So I think there is flexibility in that midfield for Liverpool. I don't think that they're not rooted to a Fabinho anymore, where it's well, he plays there and then you have 2 either side of them. I think it's a little bit more sort of mix and match and see what the game needs. But they've got a lot of midfielders at least now that can run, that can pass, that can tackle, that have got size about them, and can create, and that is really exciting for Liverpool, isn't it? Because it hasn't been the case really. They've had players for a long time who've relied on their energy and their lungs, and when their energy and their lungs started to fail them a little bit, it stood out a mile, didn't it? And it doesn't look like Liverpool are going to be short of legs this season.
Certainly, when we're sort of looking at sort of deep lying midfielders, you could argue the same about Szoboszlai. We know that his manager for Hungary, Marco Rossi, has specifically said, I think he has traits that would be suitable for a sort of number 6 role. Szoboszlai isn't so keen on that. He wants to be playing a bit further up the pitch, but he can do that, and he has done that already for Liverpool. So I'm not so sure that I necessarily, though I appreciate, I think, why so many were sort of concerned about this sort of heading into the season after the summer signings. But you actually look at the squad and you look at the players and sort of their functions. You think, well, actually, we've got a few players that even if they're not sort of explicitly that kind of sort of Fabinho sort of role that we talked about in the summer when we were thinking about players like Florentino Luis. We do have players that can come in, can play deep, and even if it is, as you say, sort of playing with sort of 2 midfielders behind a number 10, then there are solutions that we can go for. Ultimately, we have to respect that when we're talking about the next iteration of Liverpool, it's not going to necessarily be a carbon copy of what came before, which is, it's not a bad thing, certainly, judging by the start of this season. And I do want to touch on the start of this season in the sense of Klopp's talked about reinvigorating his players and, sort of saying, I think there was a line he said at one of his press conferences, we said, look, this isn't year 8. This is my 8th year at Liverpool. This is year 1. We're starting something new. We're starting something exciting. And that certainly seems to be the case. Obviously, he's building something from a better starting point than the side that he inherited from Brendan Rodgers back in 2015. But it's more of an exciting year 1, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wrote that in pre-season. I think it was the most exciting Liverpool pre-season for years I can remember, because so much was unknown, and it was unknown in terms of what the levels of established players was at, what the future of established players was at, unless we saw some established players or a lot of established players leave in the summer. We didn't know what type of player they were going to bring in, how many they were going to bring in. They ended up bringing in 4 midfielders. There was young players that you were looking at and saying, well, where are they at? What's their level at? Curtis Jones, Harvey Elliott, Stefan Bajcetic, Bendo, Jerrell Quansah added his name to that mix. And there was a sort of a bit of encouragement from the end of last season, but generally a feeling of, okay, well, how much damage did that do in terms of missing out on the Champions League? What are where are their minds going to be at? And I really do think in the first few weeks of the season, I think they've answered a lot of those questions that I had and others had, in terms of that they're not finished. Players like, for example, Trent, players like Van Dijk, Robertson, Salah, they're still elite players. They're capable of putting in these kind of elite performances. And if you can get the new breed around them and the younger players and a bit of legs and like I say, maybe a little bit more natural technical quality in sort of tight areas, and that's what they seem to have targeted in McAllister, in Gravenberch, in Szoboszlai in particular. You can really build something really impressive, and I do think that, listen, if you wanted to put the glass half empty, you'd say Liverpool haven't yet been absolutely non-stop convincing, possibly apart from the Aston Villa game. But what you would say is they weren't always absolutely convincing when they were going for league titles, and when they had sticky periods in games. What they were absolutely convincing with was that you felt like they'd find a way to win the game, and they felt like they'd find a way back in if they went 1-0 down, or that their pressure would eventually cause a mistake in the opposition. And I lost count of the amount of times in second halves of games between maybe 2018 and 2020, even 2022, where you'd start to feel in the second half of a game, you go, this is going Liverpool's way. This is going Liverpool's way. They're starting to get into the right position. And I felt it at Newcastle when they were away, even with 10 men. I felt once Jota came on, I felt like, I tell you what, they're starting to get into this game. They're going to score it. They're going to score. I felt it in the game at Wolves almost immediately from the half-time whistle, from the second whistle to start the second half. I felt it that Liverpool were going to get something out of this game. They're not going to get beat today. And that is a big, big thing that they've answered, I think, and a big sort of step mentally to make for Jurgen as well, because he would have seen some of the moments last season when he felt like, it's just not going to be our day. Maybe sometimes inside 5-10 minutes you could feel that. You don't get that sense anymore with Liverpool. You get the sense that, okay, they might have a wobble and they might concede a goal, and a fast winger might be able to get in behind them on a counter attack and things like that. But you do have this certainty about them that they're gonna make this a game. They're going to make this a game, even if they're not playing well, and that's a very good trait to have, and one that's served Liverpool really well in the past as well.
I mean, Dominic Solanke was asked about this specifically after the Wolves game, and he sort of said, well, look, obviously we'd rather be leading these games. Obviously we wouldn't want to be 1-0 behind and having to claw our way back in. But I think that says a lot about sort of Liverpool's sort of credentials this season. And I would, obviously likewise, I'd rather be seeing us dominating games right from the start. But I think it's encouraging to see Liverpool coming back from these positions and showing some resiliency. Obviously, there is room for improvement, which does bring me, I'm afraid, to the transfer side of our chat. We've all seen the chatter that's been going on around Andre and Fluminense, and positive reported conversations with the Brazilian side. Can you tell us anything about this months ahead of January, as we are?
No, I mean, this is not aimed at you, but this is one of the reasons I think Jurgen's been saying what he's been saying, is that, look, just get to grips with this team a little bit, and just sort of like, let's work out what this team is first before we start trying to throw everyone into the mix. Clearly, Liverpool liked Andre and made an attempt to see if they might have been able to sign him in the summer. So they are clearly interested in the player. Fluminense were never going to sell him, or made clear they were never going to sell him. So they probably will sell him in January. So I think there's a fair chance of getting him. But it doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter to this period, because he's not going to be able to play. It's not going to be right. We need to just, and also he's not going to change the world. Andre, when he comes in, he's a 22-year-old who's played in Brazil, so you're not waiting for Kylian Mbappe to come in and sort of all of a sudden everything's going to be okay. He's going to be another player that's going to go into that rotation of midfielders, and they'll try and work out. I think crucially for Liverpool, they have to work out what the team's going to look like in terms of the next few months. I think they've got a real good chance to do it. They've got the Europa League coming up in terms of a decent group, I think, a group that they should win, and they should be able to make changes in and to have a look at certain players. You look at the game against Lask on Thursday. Look at Ryan Gravenberch's going to play in that, surely. You're going to see Harvey Elliott probably in from the start. You're probably going to see Darwin, I think, will probably get a start in that game. You've obviously got Jerrell Quansah now available, Costa. You're going to get a look at a lot of these squad players who were saying, well, where are they at in games? That is crucial, I think, for Liverpool, so that they're in a position when they do get to January where it isn't a case of, God, we need to get someone in to fix this. It's a case of, well, actually, if we need to get this player in, he might help us out squad wise or whatever. That's the challenge for Liverpool, not to sort of pin all their hopes on a January one, as was the case last season, really, where we were almost waiting for the window to open. We probably didn't expect them to go and get who they got in terms of Gakpo, but we'd rather be in a position where it's a bit like the Luis Diaz sign, where it's like, well, actually, that's just a lovely little bonus. Let's not sort of. I think it's important for fans not to get into this situation where it's like, oh, January, it's got to be January, it's got to be January. We need to get this, we need to get this, we need to get this. They've got good players in, they've got a good team, they're building something, they're winning games. I think it's time for Liverpool and their fans to sort of really commit to this team at the moment. And I think what we're seeing from the first few weeks, and look at them scenes in the away end at Newcastle, look at them scenes in the away end at Wolves on Saturday. I mean, some unbelievable pictures of Curtis and Harvey. I think you're starting to see that the fans, I think, are starting to listen to Jurgen and starting to fall in love with this team. And that certainly wasn't the case last season, was it? I think they were sick of the sight of some of the players and some of the performances. I think there's something a lot more positive built, and I think it's important not to sort of take away from that with this idea that but in January they've got to get rid of him, or they've got to do this, or they've got to do that. Salah or whatever you want to worry about. Worry about it further down the line, because there's somewhere to get to for Liverpool at the moment. They've got to put themselves in a position where they're challenging for, top four at the minimum, maybe the title. Certainly getting out of the Europa League group, hopefully progressing in the Carabao Cup. There's a lot to play for between now and then.
No, absolutely, no, spot on. I think. In that sense, and I wrote about this sort of yesterday, I was a bit confused with some of this criticism coming at sort of Liverpool's defence, because when you actually sort of get down into the numbers, Liverpool's, and you have to sort of take into account, one, we come into Wolves, we're playing with a backline that consists of Andy Robertson, Jerrell Quansah, Joel Matip, and Joe Gomez. Two of those players are backup options. One of them is an academy lad. That's a hugely unsettled sort of back line. And then you're thinking beyond that, Van Dijk's had his suspension for 2 games. Konate only came back for a brief cameo at sort of the end of the game. I do appreciate, of course, the general calls around a need for a left-sided sort of centre half. When you're looking at sort of, because I suppose the big question really is, can Liverpool keep their first choice options fit and firing throughout the season? If they do, fantastic. You think there's not many better than Ibrahima Konate and Virgil van Dijk as a partnership. I don't know. Do you feel that sort of criticism of Liverpool's backline is unwarranted, or do you think this will become a question again where we hit January and go, Goncalo Inacio comes up, Piero Hincapié comes up, and Liverpool go, probably is a good time to sort of get some backup in?
Yeah, I think there's a worry about Joel Matip generally. I mean, listen, he's not going to be here next season, is he? There's every chance he's going to be leaving on a free. So that's going to be addressed, or got to be addressed at some point. I think there's a worry about Joel Matip generally in terms of his form. Look, he played well against Villa, but he was poor. He was poor against Wolves, and I think most worryingly, he just looked nervous, and he looked like someone who isn't in control of sort of, or isn't able to control what he's doing really in the game, and he doesn't look sure of himself. I think that is a worry. I think I wrote in my piece that if he was sort of saying, "Oh, you're going to have to bring Virgil back in," you'd have a stronger case for him to come in for Matip as you would for Quansah, in the next game, given what we saw at Wolves. I think Gomez, I felt sorry for Gomez. I felt like he was hung out to dry a little bit by the system in the first half. I think it doesn't make sense. I think I wouldn't say he's a reluctant fullback, but he's not a 100% comfortable fullback alone. Asking him to be a fullback / midfielder like Trent is, I thought was just it just felt a little bit unnecessary and a little bit damaging for the team and for Gomez. And he obviously had his hands full with Pedro Neto in that first half and really struggled. I thought he showed a lot of character in the second half and got better as the game went on, and he was quite influential, getting up that right flank in the second. So credit to him for that, coming back after a really disappointing or difficult first half. I think you have to. We said it in the summer also. Liverpool, if they keep people fit, shouldn't have too many problems with the defence. But we know that there's a very good chance that Liverpool won't keep everyone fit. A general season means you don't keep everyone fit, but when you've got Kanate, you've got Gomez, you've got Matip, they're all three. I've got a history of getting up injuries, keep them out for a couple of weeks, a month. So that's bound to happen. And once that happens, then Liverpool will be stretched. But I think Quansah's a positive, obviously. Van Dijk's back now after his ban. I think hopefully he's learned his lesson in terms of giving stick to referees. Trent should be back. I think there's a fair chance Trent's back for the West Ham game. I think he would have sat out the last game anyway. So I think we'll look at West Ham for Trent. And yeah, it looks a bit different, doesn't it? But I think longer term, yeah, you're looking at Liverpool having to buy at least one defender. I think a centre back when Matip goes, but I think also a full back, whether it's a left back or a right back. It's probably more likely to be a right back. I think that there's definitely a need for Liverpool to just either buy one or get Conor Bradley or Calvin Ramsey into that position where they can be part of the squad, which it looks at the moment like it's a long way off.
No, absolutely. I think you're right, though, Neil. I think there is, whilst we can talk about transfers until the cows come home, but I think there does come a point, certainly, where you have to look at Liverpool's season and sort of appreciate where we are, appreciate what the new players are doing, what this sort of new look squad is doing, and there is plenty to feel excited about Liverpool. You really. Football is obviously a momentum sport, and once you get down to it, I think the wins keep coming, and I think we get another one against Lask, another one against West Ham, and you think, wow, what could this Liverpool side achieve by the end of the season? It is the feeling around it is completely different. I do want to touch on that lastly before we sign off, because obviously, Neil, you've gone out and struck it alone with covering Liverpool, and I think this is probably the most interesting season for you to have done that. So I just want to get your perspective sort of around the 5-game mark here where we are now, just how you're finding it all. And, is everything that you sort of imagined it would be?
What work life, you mean?
Yeah, I suppose, with covering Liverpool specifically.
Yeah, listen, I will say that it helps when Liverpool are playing well. It helps when there's positivity around Liverpool, because why would you want to read me saying, got beat 3-0 again at Wolves, or, went to Brentford and didn't compete, blah, blah, blah. So it definitely does help. It's not the only thing I'm doing. It's a big part of what I'm doing work-wise, covering Liverpool. I'm doing other stuff as well, obviously, with you guys, with Redman and the Anfield Wrap, and I'm doing some work as well. But you don't see because you have to pay bills, obviously. But yeah, it's been good. I think the reaction's been really good. I think Liverpool fans, obviously, we know that how big the appeal is. You'll know as well as anyone how big the global appeal of Liverpool is, and how hungry people are to read and to know and to hear and to talk. I was out last night, funny enough, for some food with my family, and an Irish guy came over to me in the pub. We were watching the Everton Arsenal game, and he came over to me and he just wanted to talk to me for 20 minutes about what you think Salah, what you think Szoboszlai, what you think of this guy, I get that a lot. I think it's always really nice to sort of to speak to people like that and to see that you're a very small part of it, but you're a part of this sort of huge community, if you like, and world. So the take up's been really good. I think obviously there's new things to adapt to. It's different, just work wise, not being employed necessarily, but you're still having to work. I think it's good that it gives me a bit of editorial control, which is always something I think the journalists always quite like to have. They don't want to be sort of looking at dodgy headlines going on their stuff and going, well, who's put that on that, or someone's edited their copy. Obviously, I'm in control of most of that now, which is good. I think also I think you're right. I think this is an exciting season for Liverpool, and I just feel like there's something building, snowballing, and momentum. I think when the European games kick in as well, and when you start to, I think Liverpool got a half decent fixture list coming up. Sort of between now and maybe the end of November, the start of December. I think there's a real chance for Liverpool to make some hay, and I do think that's a really exciting time for the club, but also for people who are covering it and sort of who are looking and saying, well, tell you what, we might be reporting on a long run into the deep stage of the Europa League. It might be a title bid. Listen, it feels like we're being a bit greedy asking for that after last season, but it might be. It should be a top four bid, and it should be some really good football as well, and really good footballers that we're watching. It's a pleasure really to watch Szoboszlai. It's a pleasure to watch McAllister. People know how much I think of Curtis Jones. People know how much I think of Harvey Elliott. Darwin, I think, is coming to the fore. Cody obviously got his first goal. I think that was important after a difficult performance. There's a lot of sort of really interesting aspects to Liverpool. I'm going to Morecambe tomorrow to watch the Papa John's game. And yeah, but even that, you're looking at that and saying, well, do you know what? Ben Doak might play in that. Bobby Clark might play in that. You could have, Quansah would probably have played in it if he hadn't made this step up. But there's a lot of players that you look at and go, that's could be a really interesting team. That you're looking at the last game on Thursday and thinking that could be 7 changes and still a really, really good side. There's just at the moment, I'm really positive about Liverpool. I have been for a while, to be fair. I was even in amongst all of them, the maelstrom of the summer transfer window. I still thought Liverpool had come strong this season. I think I might even have to revise my opinion upwards this time around. I think I could have picked a good year to go solo.
No, absolutely. I think, and it is such an exciting time, and it's nice to feel like this. And I think I'm gonna touch on. I think it was Jan. It was Ange Postecoglou for Tottenham. He was sort of questioned about Tottenham fan expectations and are things getting a bit out of control, and he sort of said, well, no, the part of football is getting carried away. It is enjoying, it's living in the moment. Why would I want to burst that bubble? Let's let everyone enjoy the moment, and that's, I suppose, what we should be doing as Liverpool fans, as Liverpool writers, as Liverpool content producers, as Liverpool journalists. Let's get lost a bit in the moment. Let's not completely be too sort of realistic, because at the end of the day, the quality of football we've seen and the sense of positivity, as you said, enthusiasm around the club is at a high. Let's ride that wave and see where it takes us, I suppose. Well, I think
so. Sorry, just to mention on that. I mean, I did see a lot of that when Liverpool were on the rise, and so from 2017 to 2022, really, where I was in the grounds and I was in the service stations and the airports and the train stations and wherever, and I saw the mood among supporters that they loved it. I saw it on social media, a different aspect to it where people were stressed out by it and were sort of, I felt like they didn't enjoy it a little bit, and they sort of, I can remember. I'll give you an example. I can remember Liverpool beat Roma 5-2 in the first leg of the semi-final of the Champions League. 5-2. They were 5-0 up after an hour or 70 minutes. And they won 5-2. They were basically into the final of the Champions League, and they're moaning about the defending. Oh, we've conceded 2 away goals there. That's going to cost us. Blah blah blah. So just you've got to sort of. We're very lucky. I've been very lucky in the time. My 5 years ago, I went to 3 Champions League finals. I've got a text message train off UEFA. I've got a text message conversation which I saved from UEFA. They've only ever sent me 3 text messages, UEFA. And they're all accreditation confirmation for Champions League finals, and that sort of tells you, doesn't it? Well, I mean, that's what Liverpool are doing, but it doesn't always happen like that. You can go years without a day like that, one day like that. So let's savor these ones. Let's savor this. It might look a bit, okay, you beat Wolves away. You were poor in the first half. So what a let off it was when Robertson put that one through, inside the near post. What a let off when Harvey jumps over the defence and goes and gets a yellow card. 2 players booked for the same celebration. One of them, and it turns out neither of them actually scored the goal. So why not enjoy these moments and sort of really, forget about what's gone before, forget about what's coming, forget about January and worrying about, oh God, what's going to happen with Salah, or are we going to get Andre in, are we going to get this centre back? Just have a look at this team at the moment and have a look at this sort of mood around it, and let's keep that going. That would be my advice to fans. There's a lot of teams waiting to sort of burst your bubble anyway, so don't burst your own. Let's sort of, let's try and keep that sort of positivity going, because I think it'll make a big difference as this season goes on. I think if Liverpool can get an atmosphere going where they feel like they're in for something, they're in a title race or they're in a Europa League sort of battle to go and win it or whatever, I think Anfield and the sort of mood around the club can make a real difference.
Absolutely. Now let's ride that wave, and then you can certainly be sure, Neil, that you'll be keeping the positivity going on your Substack with covering Liverpool at neilj.substack.com, and of course on Twitter at Neil Jones Goal. Go have a look, subscribe, and enjoy all the good stuff. If you're watching this on our YouTube or listening onto your podcast, wherever you get it, do drop us a subscribe and let us know your thoughts on Liverpool's season, how much you're enjoying it so far, and of course, you can find all this good stuff on our Substack at empireofthecop.substack.com. This has been Empire of the Cop Insider with the lovely Neil Jones. I've been your host, Farrell Keeling. Thank you and take care.